Hey everybody, we are here just outside of East Palestine, Ohio, in Darlington, Pennsylvania. I'm here with Christina. Christina has been dealing with the effects of the derailment here just like everybody else has. We're roughly 6 or so miles from the derailment site at this point, right?
Yep, 5.9.
If this derailment happened 500 feet further down the tracks, essentially, we'd be talking about Darlington, Pennsylvania, instead of East Palestine, Ohio being the main name behind this. Obviously, folks in Darlington, such as yourself, and many others we've talked to, are needing to deal with all of this, even though in a lot of cases they're not getting some of the same resources that are available to folks in Ohio. But I guess, what has the process been like for you in dealing with getting any sort of assistance? I know you've got concerns over your water here, things like that. How has that kind of process been playing out?
Well, I've been to the, down to the clinic, or a couple times I went to the clinic that was set up in Darlington, and they had a sign-up sheet to get on water testing and soil testing. And so we went down, we got on the sign-up sheet, and then the next time I went down to clinic, my dad went to see if we were still on it, and they didn't have our names on there. So then another time we went down to one of the open houses that they had in Darlington, and we went to check to see if, where we were at on the sign-up sheet, and we weren't on the sign-up sheet.
Gotcha. And this is for testing, like urine
For
testing,
water,
or for water testing?
Water
or
and soil.
Water and soil testing, okay.
And
so you had been putting your name on the list to get it, and then when you go to check in on it, you're not there anymore.
Right. So that's kind of odd. And I had just the other day mentioned that to the EPA as well, and they found it odd. But then just the other day, I talked to a guy from the Pennsylvania environmental protection people, and he had said that they were not going to test outside the 2 miles because they had not found anything of concern in the 2 miles. But when you go on their website, they already have testing that they've done outside the 2 miles.
Right.
And so, why aren't we getting a test done?
Right. And it seems like, too, again, no expert here, but when you look at the drone footage of how massive and widespread that chemical plume of smoke went, you don't need to be an expert to know that these chemicals moved in the air.
Yeah.
A lot of folks that have experts I talk with have described the situation even with dioxin. Dioxin is heavier than air. When that explosion and controlled burn first happened, the dioxins were launched up into the air with the thermal energy lifting it up, spreading out in those big black clouds among countless other chemicals involved and byproducts of the chemicals that were set on fire, and then all slowly start to settle everywhere. It seems to me like the least that could be done, especially for folks. I mean, we're not that far away. We were in East Palestine 12 minutes before we got here, basically. This is a very close proximity to where this happened, and it doesn't make any sense to not, even if they're right and your water is fine, just for the peace of mind.
Right.
Just do the tests. I guess, where is it being held up? Do you think it's at the state of Ohio, or sorry, the state of Pennsylvania? Do you think it's a Norfolk Southern thing? I mean, have you hit any particular roadblocks in this? Or
I'm not sure where their decision is coming from, because the EPA, just the other day, they extended their area for water testing down into Negley. And here, we're by air,
right.
3 miles from Negley.
Right.
And it's a little further if you're driving, but the chemicals in the air and in the water, they don't care where they go.
Right.
And with the night of the controlled burn, they, you could see the smoke from here, and as evening came, it's weird that they did it when they did it to me, because it got dark not long after they did it.
Right.
And so, like at midnight, I went outside, and you couldn't see the moon and the stars, and the wind was supposed to be blowing in our direction then. And then at like 2 a.m, I went out, and you could see the moon and the stars, and the wind had shifted direction, going towards Chippewa and the town of Darlington,
Yep.
and up towards Enon Valley. But like, so numerous times I've gone to people and said, hey, that wind blew towards us. And they're like, they've even heard from the government saying that South Beaver, where we're actually at, we weren't affected. But like, how are you not affected when the wind is blowing towards you? The creeks, they run down this way.
Right.
And then there's also been fracking under the ground that went all directions. So like, then you also see this plume.
Right.
And how are you not affected? And then you're sick.
Right. Yeah, so I guess to the health side of it. I mean, have you or any of your family, close friends, how have the symptoms been for you? Have you experienced, I guess, what did you experience initially when it first happened? Yeah. And is anything kind of been more persistent and will continue to flare up?
On February 5th, I started getting sick. So that's like the day before the controlled burn.
Gotcha.
And I started with just like a cough, like a slight cough. And so
at that point, too, I mean, there's still a lot of fire and smoke coming from this, as chemicals were burning already at that point. But go ahead, sorry.
And so I started with a cough, and then a bit of a headache, and then the right after they did the burn, I was like coughing nonstop and migraine, and that, like, I had a migraine and coughing, a sore throat, like congestion in here. My ears felt like they had pressure in them, and that lasted like every day until maybe like last week. And
wow, so that's, I mean,
that's a long time.
Yeah.
And like the when you go to the doctor, they'll say to you, did you do a COVID test? I've done 3 COVID tests. It's not COVID.
Right.
But so they ended up, I went to the doctor 4 times, and they ended up diagnosing me with upper respiratory infection and exposure to chemicals that are non-occupational. And then off and on through that time too, my son had a lot of coughing and runny nose. Here and there he'd get like a redness around his mouth and his nose. But then for a few days in there we had like vomiting, diarrhea, and whenever you go like up to town, or we were in New Galley one day, and New Galley's pretty far away. And you can, especially in New Galley, as soon as we stepped out of the car, you could smell stuff, smell chemicals. And then I ended up pretty sick that night with like nausea. My stomach was hurting. And then you could, different places you go, and even different days you go, you can taste chemicals on your lips or in your mouth.
I guess I wanted to ask you about this too, because this is something we're speaking with other residents about, regarding the vinyl chloride tests for humans. So like it's a urine test for vinyl chloride. You have actually gone and done that test just today, so we don't have the results yet.
Right.
But I guess, do you want to talk about the process of going through and doing that? I know a lot of folks have had a difficult time trying to get these urine tests.
Yeah, I heard from people that when they would go to their doctor or even to the hospital, that they couldn't get a prescription to get it done because they tell you, well, it's been too long. And the other day, last week, I had been able to get a prescription from a local doctor, and he had told me the whole process, like you go in there and just give them the prescription. Actually, when I called to get the prescription, they didn't even have vinyl chloride in their computers. They had to ask me for the code for it. And so when I gave them that code, as soon as I gave it to them, they found it. And so today I went down to the lab that they sent us to, and I was able to get it there. There was no problem when I walked in at all. And then we just wait now. They didn't even tell you like how long it would be or anything. But the other day, I was talking to a guy from the Pennsylvania Environmental Protection people, and through our conversation, the people testing positive for vinyl chloride had come up, and he had said to me he didn't understand why people were getting this test done now because it should be out of our systems. And I said, well, what about this metabolite? And because that's what's going to be in your urine. And so he was like, well, that shouldn't be there anymore either. So whatever labs you're using must be scamming you. And these are the same labs our primary care doctors use for any other test.
Right.
So chances are pretty small that they're going to be scamming you.
Yeah, that's an outrageous claim, because these are the same, right, to your point, these are the same labs that, like, anyone who ever has a blood test done, anyone who ever, needs to go to the hospital and have, like, these are the labs that do that. The major red flag is that if people are testing positive for vinyl chloride, which they are, I just spoke with a resident who she had the highest one that I'd seen so far.
Yeah.
And she's not the only one who has tested positive for this. Experts that I'm talking to are saying, like, you know what, it isn't a perfect test, no. However, given the amount of people who are now testing positive for vinyl chloride in their urine, and the likelihood of all of these people all being exposed via a different route of exposure to something else, when clearly you had this massive explosion in this town releasing all sorts of chemicals, some of these chemicals very likely still being prevalent as they're digging up. That could be the question mark, is because the gentleman is right that you spoke with, or the woman who is right that you spoke with, that it shouldn't be in your system anymore if it was from back in the beginning of February. Even the metabolite is called thiodicglycolic acid. I've spoken with somebody who's kind of given me some advice on how to talk about some of this stuff a little bit better, but so that is the metabolite for vinyl chloride. When you ingest it, it should only be there for a couple days. The fact that folks today and in the last couple of weeks are still testing positive for vinyl chloride in their urine means that they're still being exposed to it somehow. And a massive failure that's happened here is initially the CDC is telling people you don't need to get this test. You don't need to get this test. The state of Ohio, when they first had their clinic open in East Palestine, wasn't doing any testing of any kind. Experts that I'm talking to are saying that if right when this derailment happened, those tests were being done, and we had weeks of testing data from people over time actually going and having these, we would have a whole bunch more information if you were doing weekly tests. And you can track, okay, people are at this level this week, and then each week it's going down. That means, okay, maybe you're not being exposed anymore. But if you're getting random spikes throughout, but unfortunately, because the CDC and the EPA and all these organizations were telling people, nah, you don't need to get tested for this. You don't worry about it. Testing, that's don't worry about that right now. You worry about you, blah 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 blah. Now we don't have any of that critical data.